There are a growing number of people in the last 2 years who have made a name for themselves, talking about black goo at conferences, especially in Europe, YouTube clips, and increasingly radio interviews on the internet in the conspiracy genre. I'm not going to comment one way or the other about the accuracy or the authenticity of anyone talking about black goo outside of David, Alec and myself, because I don't have a handle on where they got their information enough to make a comment one way or the other. So in areas of this complexity, with this much newness, I'm sticking to what I personally experienced and was told by people that I was dealing with. David Griffin is coming online after the break, after the dinner break. You'll come back. David Griffin will be on Skype from the UK. Just to give you a bit of an intro, how many people here remember back in the 80s there was a whole lot of scientists, British scientists, or scientists working in Britain, who generically we call them the suicided Marconi scientists. A few people heard of that? Again, it's something you can look up on the internet, but in a nutshell, I'm pretty sure it was the 80s, it might have been the late 70s. But there were at least a dozen, maybe more, David will inform you on that, scientists who all were found dead in extremely unusual circumstances. The verdict in most of the cases was officially suicide, but you're talking about cases almost where a person has tied themselves up, shot themselves, and then driven the car with their tied-up body off the pier, and that's been deemed suicide. Interesting. Anyway, that's not quite that extreme, but you get my point. I don't want to ruin David's presentation, but David Griffin diligently got on the research trail, and I don't know how he found out what he did, but he found there was a commonality with what these scientists were researching. And it all had to do with a deep sea, on the seabed, deep sea organism, and the only really words, I guess, that they merged to describe it is programmable hydraulic fluid. Programmable hydraulic fluid. This implies a type of oily substance which can be programmed, which is an interesting concept. But that seems to be where the trail for most of us stopped, and David Griffin picked it up, and I'll be very interested to hear what he's going to say in his 45 minutes after dinner. After David has done his bit, Alec Newell will be coming online, and hopefully he won't go into too much detail about his detention and trip and actually get to the point. I just want to I promised to preface his case too. Now, I know some of you have heard this before, so bear with me. Alec Newell, in the early 90s, I believe, he had suffered a relationship breakup, and he was driving from one part of New Zealand to another in his car, which I believe is a Jaguar, because he's a car guy and likes racing cars and is into cars and into fixing up cars. Anyway, he's driving from one part of New Zealand to another on a journey which takes normally 2 to 3 hours, goes through the mountains. And in the book, he describes when his memory came back, the last memory he had was the car literally was going around a corner, but something grabbed the car and it went off the road, on a cliff, into a cloud, and that's all he remembered. The Alec Newell case is quite fascinating. I'll get back to the point. Alec started to recall his experience when he pulled up at his driveway in Auckland. He found he had no recollection of the 2 or 3 hour journey. But we all know, we've all done car drives and we've gone from A to B, and if you were to say, what was the weather? I mean, many of us have experienced sort of blanking out while you're driving maybe a familiar route. It's not unusual. And that's what he put it down to. And he noticed on the calendar that a couple of days had gone. And he felt a bit confused, a bit disoriented, and he thought, where did I spend those 2 days? I know I don't really remember the trip back, but where on earth did I spend 2 days? And he went to bed thinking about it, and the next day he woke up basically, And he realised, whoa, look at the calendar, that wasn't 2 days, that's a week plus 2 days. I have got nearly 9 or 10 days of missing time that I cannot account for. And at that point, he started having very interesting people arrive at his doorstep in New Zealand, knocking on his door. They had very posh English accents, tweed suits, and the insignia they showed him on their ID had the initials RIIA, Royal Institute for International Affairs. I don't know how many people here know what that institute is, but that is a very, very, very high up intelligence organisation overseeing lots of other intelligence organisations and more in the UK. And to cut a long story short, Alec, when he returned, this is still with no memory of his experiences, found that his car that he'd driven back was having problems that he was not able to fix. And he was rather put out by these English gentlemen who would turn up, ask him a whole lot of questions. The questions they were asking him were about his car. Has your car been in a series of electrical accidents? Now, wait a minute, I'm getting this out of context here. Let me backtrack. So Alec comes back from his trip, realises he's got 10 days missing, his car's not working, the Jaguar, he sells the car. A few days later is when the guys in the tweed suits show up and start asking him questions only about his car. They just wanted to know about the car. He was very disturbed by their demeanour, and so he basically went into hiding, so he thought. He moved to a friend's house without telling anyone where he was, because the demeanour of these guys asking him questions, he felt very scared and he didn't want to be around them. But they turned up at the new location, asked him more questions with more of a severe demeanour. It turned out that the way they got put onto his trail was the person he sold the car to couldn't fix the Jaguar. They took it to the specialists in New Zealand, the Jaguar specialists. They took it apart. And they were so amazed by what they found, they contacted Jaguar headquarters in the UK. Jaguar headquarters in the UK, either their phones are tapped or someone in there is in the intelligence community or both. The bottom line was a lot of the circuitry in the engine had come back from wherever Alec had been, and it was the mirror image of what the manufacturers put out. Something technically impossible. If you've read Alec's book and account, basically what happened is he was driving along that part of the road, they grabbed him with a type of tractor beam, pulled him onto their ship, put him into a type of physical body. They took his consciousness out of his normal body, put it into a body which could survive the ship and its ecosystem environment, and said to him, okay, free will has got to be obeyed. We need to ask your permission if you want to come and be part of a project with us. And he basically said yes. He found and talked to other people from planet Earth on the spaceship. Some incredible discussion and detail. The interesting thing with Alec Newell's case is when his memory came back a couple of weeks after his experience, it came back in a rush. There was no hypnosis, no e-meters, no technology. He just started writing, and he said, his words were, it was like my hand just took off on its own and wrote down everything, and parts of it started coming back. And so he got his memory back of the experience. And he's told me a lot more about some of the things than he put in the book. There were many things he did not put in the book because of a certain relationship he developed while he was in jail. Now, I need to explain this. After Alec had sold his Jaguar, one of his old friends approached him. He hadn't been harassed by these dudes from England in the tweed suits. He felt like, okay, I've got some breathing space, I'll get my life together, I need some money. And a friend of his turned up and said, Alec, you've often fixed up cars that I've given you and we've sold them and we've shared the profit. Want to do it again? Alec said, sure, I need some money. It was a setup. The car Alec was given to fix up was stolen. Alec had never dealt in stolen cars, never would have dealt in it. He was betrayed. It was a technicality. They put him in jail for it. While he was in jail, people from the American embassy and other embassies came and visited him in his jail cell and basically told him, we know you've been out there for 10 days with a group of aliens. We just want to ask you some questions. Some of them involved power and technology questions and other bits and pieces. If you read the book, and I'm going to get into it because in some ways it leads into this whole presentation on black goo. If you read the book, these particular non-humans, who very likely are related to our ancestors, and remember the concepts and the stories you hear about a long time ago, mankind was a lot more intelligent and had a lot more technology than we do now. It's often implied, though, that we didn't have the spiritual values, the consciousness, the awareness. It seems like back then we were maybe in grade 1 on some mental, spiritual level, even though we had technology. Obviously, that technology got abused. They're not around here now. But there's a sense that in the early days, when humans were first perfected and we had the technology and we had an open relationship with people who were interacting with us and helping us build these amazing cities and jungles with blocks of stone that we still don't have cranes strong enough to lift, let alone carry over ravines and up and down rivers. Where was I? Anyway, you get my point. The sense of the point is that when we had this technology, a lot of us went to the stars, and we obviously experienced changes in our physical body. So it's probably not a big shock to consider the idea that many of what we call aliens are actually genetically related to us, and that one of the reasons that they have an interest in us is because we have a relationship in the past. I think you need to bear that in mind when you are making black and white distinctions between aliens, who's good and who's bad, because the people who I've spoken to who are aware of what we would call aliens, the people who've had regular and ongoing experience, they don't really discern. I mean, they are in the headspace that there is only life forms with consciousness out there. You are a life form with consciousness. We are on a planet with billions of other life forms with consciousness, but we take them for granted. We call them insects, plants and animals. We're fascinated by a life form with consciousness that doesn't live on this planet. We argue about it, we stress about it. Are we being invaded? Are we being eaten? I want to tell you a piece of information. I'm not sure whether I revealed this last year. If I did, I probably got him into trouble. But now that he's dead, there's a few things I can say that I wasn't able to say before. Anyway, I should talk about that. So that gives you a sense of the Alec Newald story. For those interested, the reason they asked him, of all the humans, turned out to be, again, a relationship. Somewhere back in the past, Alec was one of that race. They considered him, even though he was living in a human body with no conscious memory, they considered his soul, his consciousness, a part of their race, who accidentally got trapped here on planet Earth as a result of doing a scientific survey, having some technical accident, and dying in the physical body as an alien on planet Earth meant that the soul seemed to be scooped up into a reincarnational cycle here on Earth. In other words, because he died on this planet, he wasn't able to join his parent civilization in any communicable form. It's like he entered a quarantine. But there is still the ability for them to reach out down the lineage. And in this lifetime, Alec had a particular DNA, a particular blood type, and while he was a child, they visited him in playgrounds, the invisible play children that some people talk about. They groomed him, they nurtured him, they gave him information and concepts as a plant for the future. They left him alone for decades and decades. He got into just being an ordinary New Zealand bloke with cars and racing, loved racing. When he got back into his experience, there was like a type of reconnection. And they told Alec the story of their race and why they were asking him to participate in a project which they felt was necessary to save their race. A couple of you have heard me talk about it before. I've got enough minutes to talk about it. Their story is not dissimilar to others that I've heard. It is the idea that a civilization followed technology rather than, I guess, spirituality, the meaning of life. So everything was ordered, clean, neat, no problems. Maybe it was all fair, but in terms of feelings, a bit devoid. This civilization, with very advanced technology, lots and lots of people, and spanning millions and millions of what we would call Earth years, found that they had taken a level of technology which had caused their evolution to stagnate. Well, anyway, I don't want to go into too many details, but the whole civilization felt that their civilization was going to stagnate into oblivion. It's based on the concept, and they explain this in the book. They have this awareness of a type of pulse that goes through the universe, all the universes, every so often. I don't know how else to explain it, a pulse, a wave, a heartbeat. But when it ripples through your universe, it is like, they describe it as an opportunity to go up an octave. So you might be on note C here, but when this goes through, you've gone up an octave. You're still on note C, but it's an octave up from before. So everything is, in some ways, there in context to each other in the sense that it was before, but it's gone up a frequency level. In their particular case, they consider taking advantage of this pulse as a civilization as a necessary part of this growth. But they noted that the pulse had gone through some time ago, a long time ago by our reckoning. The pulse went through and they had no observable effects on their civilization. So they experimented with one of the big suns in the centre of their civilization to try and technologically adjust the next pulse millions of years later or whatever. The second pulse went through, it didn't take them with it, and they realised they had seriously stuffed up. So, being a technologically advanced civilization, they decided they needed an earthling. Can you believe it? Their logic is this, is that they expect planet Earth to experience the pulse in the very near future. They want to use their genetic and spiritual heritage connection with humans to, if you like, ride that wave. So their idea was, we've got to get certain human DNA, because of the consciousness side of it, into our species. So they basically said to Alec, will you come aboard here? We've got some nice females for you at the other end, and it has to be done with your permission. We can't take it without your permission. You've got to be conscious, aware, you've got to agree. Otherwise, it's almost as if that whole cooperation imbued his reproductive essence with what they were needing. We hear about greys taking people and mechanically removing sperm from people. I cannot begin to tell you some of the cases I've spoken to that are not in the public domain, where both men and women have had the most incredible sex with all sorts of creatures, some just for fun and others for reproduction. There's at least one famous case in Sydney, I'm sure you're aware of. It got researched. There was a bit of pubic hair left around the penis of one of the males, and this pubic hair has no human DNA in it. It got tested in CSI laboratories, all sorts of stuff. Bill Chalker wrote a book about it. The evidence, there's a lot more physical evidence for some of these bizarre things than people realise, but you've got to go looking for it. The mainstream media are not going to tell you. Okay, now, I'm here to talk about the subject of black goo generally, but at the time of my involvement with some people, it was referred to as the organism. Some people in our little group were calling it Orgy, short for the organism. Now, how many people here recall my talk of a few years ago where I talked about the Berserk project? Because we covered the organism in that to a degree. Nobody's putting their hands up. And if you did, you probably don't remember a lot of the detail, correct? Yeah, okay. Right, well, as you know, I have the most exciting job on the planet, and I love being contacted by people who have bizarre and amazing stories to tell me. One day I was on the internet and somebody said, Duncan, you've got to go to this public discussion conspiracy forum because there's a development there and we think you should be in on it and you should be interested in it. That was what we called the Berserk thread. It was on a forum which is still in existence. The forum is called Godlike Productions. Godlike Productions and other forums. It started up as a conspiracy chat forum. There's another one out there, Above Top Secret. Both forums have evolved to be quite different to how they started out. In their beginnings, there was a lot of original discussion. The Godlike Productions has gone on to become a real redneck, gun-toting, fundamentalist Christian. And I mean, the Christians in that forum don't even believe that the Pope is Christian. They don't accept Catholicism. They hate blacks, they hate women, they hate Muslims, they hate gays, and from the sound of it, it's deteriorated into a discussion forum of 20-year-old guys who, I won't say anything rude, but let's put it this way, involves the circle and the right hand. Anyway, but the point is this, such forums like this, where you can anonymously post information, are also places where interesting whistleblowers go to deposit information. So I have, over the years, extracted some interesting leads, ideas, which I've chased up, and they've been valid, purely because there has been an opportunity for someone to anonymously put up information. One of the more interesting discussion threads on there was purposefully set up by a group of intelligence agents who generically referred to themselves as the Rand Rubicon Revealers, RRR. They had an open relationship with several administrators and owners of these forums, so they weren't doing it without the owner's permission. And on Godlike Productions, Trinity, the current owner at the time, that's not his real name, it's his handle, Trinity gave them permission to do these projects. He didn't see any harm in it. Interestingly enough, the most popular threads in all of Godlike Productions' history were all created by these intelligence agents. Now, you're probably immediately thinking, what is on those threads? Now, bear in mind that, and this I never got my head around, and I can probably thank you. Let me just read that. You can leave that on there. Actually, just blank that off so people don't get distracted. I'm going to read a bit out here. The first thread, the thread I was alerted to go and investigate ended up being called the Berserk thread. Bezerk. It's not the proper way of spelling berserk. It ended up being an acronym. So when I entered the Berserk thread, there was some real-time events going on in the Gulf of Mexico. And this is around the time of the Deepwater Horizon accident, where the Gulf of Mexico suddenly had an oil rig disaster, sealed off the area, all sorts of people going in, putting all sorts of chemicals at the bottom of the ocean. What was really interesting about this thread is that the people who started this thread knew in advance that Deepwater was going to happen and had positioned intelligence assets to convey the information to the thread. It sounded very unbelievable at the time, and I had to spend a lot of hours diving down into things like, I don't know whether you know, but you can go on the internet and you can see every buoy in the ocean. You can just look at a buoy in the Pacific and see whether it suddenly goes up and down 200 feet, and then you go to Godlike Productions and say, there's a tsunami warning, You can find incredible details. In my particular case, it was claimed on the thread that certain maritime vessels, oil rigs, and science vessels were engaged in collaboration on a project and they had gone from A to B. Well, you can check that. You can go online and you can check all sorts of ship registries and movements, whether they're private or maritime transportation ships. So I was able to verify that indeed these ships had followed these paths on those days and were in those positions. So I could see straight away that what the person who had created the thread was talking about was accurate. Now, I don't want to go into the details of it all because the discussion on the thread was intended to bring from the public certain people that the intelligence operatives wanted to, well, basically, if you like, they wanted to pull out of the audience of Godlike Productions millions of people. They wanted to get a handful of civilians who would be smart enough to take aboard what they're talking about and then go out and redistribute it, redisseminate it. They're not in a position where they can actually do it themselves, but you'll notice the encouragement to go out and spread the word if you're a civilian. I got actively encouraged to spread and talk about anything I thought. They were not allowed to do it. So they sort of rely on civilians to put out some concepts and things. There was internal politics, and to cut a long story short, the whole project was about them telling us their ongoing research and experiences in relation to what this organism is. Now, I'm going to pan back and tell you the larger picture, though before I do that, I just want to read one sentence here. This is from the guy I call Acolyte. Acolyte was the handle or the non-real name of the person who started the thread. His real name was Chris de Beer, and he died of a heart attack in August last year. I flew over in 2019. Late 2011, I flew over to meet this guy. I went and attended Michael Tellinger's conference in Johannesburg, which is very similar to the Nexus conference. And you've met Michael, he's a lovely guy. So I picked that as a great cover to meet with this guy because he's an intelligence operative and you don't really go making arrangements with intelligence operatives of other countries unless you do the right thing. I took someone from Australia who is in the game, if you want to put it that way, so that, in other words, I got as much approval as I could from our people to go to South Africa and meet one of their intelligence agents in a non-official capacity. So what I'm saying is I got to know the guy. I went over again last year, took my wife and our stepson, and we got to spend quite a few more days. And it was in the evenings over a scotch and cigars that the real information started to come out and the questions I had about his past and how did you get into a part of the intelligence community that openly discusses aliens and terraforming of the planet being organised by aliens who were involved with the creation of humans hundreds of thousands of years ago and are coming back. The general context of Acolyte and his colleagues is that they consider themselves, well, they are intelligence agents. They're at that level of awareness of the extraterrestrial situation. So it puts them above all the agencies that you can name. I don't even know the name of the agencies they were in. It doesn't matter. It's all academic. This is what he said to me at the very beginning. I work for the revealers called Beyond the Rubicon at RAND. And we're talking about RAND, the think tank, RAND Corporation, the think tank. The RRR, in brackets, RAND Rubicon Revealers, are tired and fed up with what's going on and have decided to reveal and let the populace know what is really going on. Our group has the highest approval from the RAND echelon to continue. He also says in that email that we knew the oil rig would be attacked between 9 and 10 and, oh no, that's not relevant. But I just wanted to put in his own words that they had some form of permission from somewhere up high. Now, in previous lectures that I've given here, if there's one thing I wanted you to take away, apart from the details, is I have experienced nothing but encouragement to spread the concept, number one, that we're not alone in the universe, and number two, that things are going to change quite dramatically in the future. One of the dates or time periods I've had in my head for a few years is October 2016. One of the reasons why October 2016 is in my head, and there's several reasons, is to do with my ongoing discussions with what I call the R's. So when I say the R's, I'm not talking about the thing you sit on, I'm talking about the Rand Rubicon Revealers. So in a nutshell, these guys, and it's probably the only way to do it is just to nutshell it, they totally believe that a long, long time ago, mankind was modified, created, and set on a path pretty much to do what we're doing now, and the beings that had organised this moved on and did other projects. But they installed what we call chief executive officers. They installed management, and those management beings are not human as we would know them. So I'm talking to Acolyte in South Africa. We've got a scotch and a cigar going, and the conversation goes to, well, when and how were you first told, as an intelligence agent, that there were aliens, and what were you told? How were you told it? Were you given a manual, ET 101, to read? What's the story? Basically, he said yes. He said, I was given a briefing paper. And I should stress, this guy, Chris de Beer, is bloodlined. All of the operatives in that group were from branches of very prestigious European noble and royal families. It's bloodlined. At that level of UFO secrecy, unless you have some absolute immediate skill and resource, which happens less and less these days because they've been able to clone humans since the 70s for those sort of purposes, unless you are in the bloodlines, very few people get into that loop. That's more recent. I think it's shut off around the 70s or 80s. So these intelligence officers absolutely believe that the people who created us are coming back. And at the same time they're coming back, there's another lot coming here who don't really have our best interests in heart, but they have their best interests in heart. And so they're hoping and they're believing that the original people who created us are like the cavalry coming in. But they stress it's all going to happen at the last minute. So their concerns and their dialogue with me regarding the black organism is totally about their understanding of black goo is that it is a technology, an artificial intelligence nanotechnology, not alive as we know it, doesn't have emotions, doesn't care about good or evil. It acts as it's programmed, like a computer. And this is the interesting thing, and this is where you'll start to see how concepts are planted into science fiction movies in order to get the concept out of there, because you immediately can think of X-Files and The Thing. But these intelligence operatives told me and assured me, and I've got some bits to read out here in a minute, that it's only in the last few years or decades this organism which lay inert under the Earth's crust, largely under the Antarctic. In terms of details, they have a lot of details about this organism that they knew and were networking with other nations. So the Russians, the Chinese, the Americans, totally aware of this for decades because of their presence in the Antarctic. Extreme cold makes this organism inert. The organism receives signals from space. It rises up using whatever medium that it prefers, what we call liquid medium, so water and underground oil reserves are used by the organism to move itself through. It's not a blob of goo or oil. It's a type of nanotechnology which uses fluids to move itself through and then moves on. They totally analyse it as a terraforming substance. It can terraform human bodies, soil, it changes everything it comes in contact with. And in terms of humans, contact translates as death. But what's really interesting, and I had to ask the guys this several times, is that this substance, this technology, can actually reanimate dead bodies. Animals appear to come back to life. And I guess what I'm saying is it's a classic zombie situation. I mean, all these zombie movies where dead people get up and are hacked around. Did you ever wonder why in the last 15 and 20 years we've had so many zombie apocalypse scenarios? Did you see on the internet that parts of the armed forces and emergency rescue services are practicing for a type of zombie upheaval? I mean, I thought it was a joke until I did the research. Zombies are taken seriously by some people. But how on earth can you justify the explanation of a zombie? You can imagine how amazed and surprised I was when intelligence operatives from RAND are telling me this sort of stuff matter-of-factly. Okay, can you put that thing up on the screen that we had before? Dan, thanks. Okay, I'm going to read it and you guys can scroll it down just in case you can't hear me. But you can see it on the screen. This is Acolyte talking. Can we have it back? This is what I now believe and think. I also think that some of you already know or feel some of this information. This is just my current understanding, so you're welcome to disagree with me or to have a different opinion. He was being polite because it was the early days of meeting up with each other. The 1,000 pages he's talking about is the 1,000 pages of discussion on the Berserk thread. Okay, next page. Okay, to sum up the Berserk thread. Wow, that's loud. Are you hearing me okay? I can't. To sum up the Berserk thread or project in a short and sweet version, the Berserk project was sanctioned and controlled, a phased leak of information and a communication platform to the others in real time. One part I missed out is these intelligence operatives were not just 4 or 6 in number. They were in contact with many other intelligence agents from many other agencies at different levels who felt that we were in the end times. Things were going to change past the point of any control. There was discussion that it was going to be everyone for themselves at that level in the intelligence community, maybe in the next short period of time or next few years. A lot of sense of panic and dismay, which is consistent with them starting to deliver information to civilians that had previously remained very highly classified. They're saying at the bottom is, our whistle is blowing softly. If we blow too hard, some eardrums might pop, and then everyone would be deaf. And that basically summarises their strategy with their phased release of information onto the internet. Obviously, they were very pleased that the editor of Nexus came into their little inner circle and participated with chatting. We have put some of the information in the magazine, and I've delivered a couple of conference presentations about it. Unfortunately, it is so complex that it's very hard to convey this in a short lecture. I don't believe that the details are that important. What is important to take away is the idea that you've got a bunch of intelligence agents discussing with a bunch of civilians and actually delivering some goods and evidence about this substance. Can we go down to the next page? That's the good one. Berserk is all about a primordial organism that has been activated to prepare Earth geologically, climactically, for the arrival of the Draco. And he's not ashamedly using the word Draco. These guys do not have any time for the New Ages who are into the Ascended Masters coming back and the aliens. They totally accept that there are lots of visitors coming here who all have their own agenda and reasons. Some of them are just hungry, some of them are curious, some of them actually feel that we're a new fledgling species and we should be protected and nurtured into, we're like a newborn baby to some. All my investigations and researches indicate that a lot of it is happening now. Now, I should just sidetrack here. When I was sitting there on the veranda talking to Acolyte, and I said to him, well, what's in the manual? What did you read? And he said, Duncan, you already know. You talk about it all the time. And I said, yeah, but I'm winging it half the time based on conversations. I said, I want, for the first time ever, an intelligence operative to tell me in black and white what they read, how they read it, and what you are told. I've dealt with lots of intelligence operatives. if you ask the right questions, they'll give you answers if they're allowed to. Otherwise, they just will answer your question with another question and hope you're smart enough to do it. With Acolyte, he came right out and said, we are told, as intelligence operatives, there are 2 races of aliens who are in charge of Earth and have been for a heck of a long time. I said, who are they? He goes, well, it's the Greys and the reptilians. And I'm going, you're kidding. You know, he says, no. He said, this is serious. He says, and I said, well, do you answer to them? Do you report to them? Does your superior talk to them? Do you have meetings? What's the story? He said, no. He said, we all mind our own business. He said, they are in charge of the big picture, creating religions, including the latest religion, which is called science. Anyway, I won't go into that. I could talk for a long time about science being a religion. It's not even consistent to itself. What is important to take away in this part of the conversation is that these intelligence operatives do not consider the Greys and the Dracos to have in-your-face, ongoing projects that are affecting as many of humans on the planet as you would think in the popular literature. So what I'm saying is, when you hear about these abductions and Greys and they're on a ship and they're on a table and they look up and they see grey aliens and a reptilian, etc., it's really hard to work out whether they're the same type of beings that these are referring to. Just like there are lots of variations of the human race on planet, you've got Chinese, you've got Negroids, you've got white Caucasians, we have different temperaments, slightly different DNA and genetics, etc. I've got to stress that there are a bunch of different Greys and there are a bunch of different reptilians. You can take Linda Moulton Howe's research, where she's published conversations and interviews with people who've had conversations with reptilians, and those guys had nothing but our best interests at heart, and they talk about other reptilians who are not so nice. You can find nice humans, and you can find humans that just want to control you. You can find humans that want to save the planet, and you can find humans that want to destroy it. It's no different off this planet. There are life forms out there that are hungry. There are life forms up there which like to destroy anything they can't assimilate, and there are other life forms out there that like to grow and nurture and expand. For some reason, and nobody has given me a coherent reason or answer why, it's all coming down to the very near future. Okay, you've all read that bit, so you can go to the next page. At the last talk I gave at the Nexus conference, I mentioned my observation. If you detach, pan back, do some research, and the examples are plenty, you can argue very coherently and convincingly that somebody took planet Earth about 150 years ago and said, okay, these humans, we've got to upgrade them. We've got to upgrade their technology. And we've got to do it fast. I cannot begin to tell you how many scientists, famous scientists, including some of our famous astronomers, the guy who invented the Hale, some of the astronomical observatories. One of the most famous ones, I'm pretty sure it was Hale. I've got his book at home. But this was one of the American scientists who, as a result of his research and discoveries and thoughts, were able to see further into the universe than ever before. So Hubble and all these other telescopes are direct descent from this one particular astronomer. Now, how did this astronomer get his information? A little green man would pop into existence, sometimes when he was alone, pondering a very technical question about the convex parts of the glass, how light interacts with this, and they would have a discussion of a very complex technical nature, and he would have little understandings and breakthroughs which he would bring into his technology, and that's why he became famous. But this is 100 years ago, and to tell people that you got your ideas that have made you famous from a little green man who pops into existence when you're alone weighed heavily on this astronomer's mind, and he admitted himself periodically to an insane asylum, openly saying, This little green man pops up every now and again, tells me very technical information. It's always right. I get famous. Mankind is able to see further and further into the universe. There are so many examples of people having breakthrough inspirations in dreams. Look, even in the I don't think many people of you know this case. In the 1950s in Brisbane, there were a couple of scientists who I believe were reasonably well known. I'm not going to tell you their names because maybe you can go to the UFO research group in Brisbane and ask Cheryl more details about it. But the gist of the story was this. There were a couple of scientists, I believe it was in the 50s or 60s, regularly meeting in an unofficial capacity in a lounge room with other people. They experienced a couple of aliens who would repeatedly materialise in their house, in their room, and hold very detailed discussions of a scientific and technical nature. What's really interesting is the description of the aliens. It's not a common one. I've only ever heard of two cases. Both, well, the first one was reported to me and no one else. But the description of the aliens, you may have a memory flash for me talking about it before. Ordinary-looking human size and shape, fingers, head, arms, legs, but their skin was a type of orange, and it looked like, the skin looked like overlapping skin cancers or overlapping moles. Each mole was about the size of a 20-cent piece. So the moles were like a dark browny orange, but if you touched them, they're silk and smooth, like the body of a spider. You won't find descriptions of those in the popular UFO literature. I've only ever heard of those visiting Australia. The other case I heard on that, and I know I'm on a tangent here, was a chap who contacted me, again, never to tell his name, although he probably gave a few details that you could work it out, but we'll try not to get him in trouble, assuming he's alive. Around the mid-1950s again, in Melbourne. This chap is second in charge of the big Royal Melbourne Hospital. He gets a call around midnight or 1 o'clock from security people downstairs saying, we have a situation where the military or security services are bringing in a body which has to be x-rayed on your new machine at the hospital. Nobody is to see, anybody on the detail, all corridors have to be vacated. We need to have a secure entry all the way through to the thing. Only X, Y and Z people are to be present, and can you organise an institute at ASAP? And he said sure. He was one of the people present, and he just assumed it was a human or maybe some special forces guy that had an accident and they didn't want to see what equipment was being used or who he was. But he was astonished to see that the body on the table was not human. It was exactly the same as the ones I was talking to you about, around 6 foot tall, and he said the same thing. He said the skin was covered with what looked like skin cancers or moles, and he was the one who said, you know, when you touch it, it's absolutely silk and smooth. I can't stress enough, you have to realise there are so many different types and shapes and frequencies of visitors to planet Earth at the moment, that the biggest question has to be, why now? What's going to happen? Why the interest in planet Earth? Forget who's good and who's bad. Honestly, it's just a total waste of time and you're going to get worked up. Do I believe that Earth is being invaded? No. If bloody Dracos and Greys created us and have run the place for more thousands of years than we can count, why would they want to invade again? They already own and run the place. They've created the religions, and for some reason they've allowed... 10 minutes. For some reason they've allowed mankind in the last 110 years to make this technological jump. Now, I know a lot of people attribute it to Nikola Tesla, and where did he say some of his information came from? Einstein. For those who still believe Einstein's a wondrous figure of integrity and research, as opposed to the people who think he's a total plagiarist and should never have got the fame and fortune that he did. Einstein said all his ideas came from God and from meditative states. We have been upgraded technologically. I don't think it's an accident. I think there's cooperation from more than one visiting race into taking mankind from point A to point B. I don't believe that we are slated for mass extinction. Why would you invest so much time and effort into upgrading the populace unless you wanted the populace and the people themselves to be a part of the experience? I suggest to you from talking, and there's... Did we pop up that last page on the thing? You're probably waiting for my instructions. Okay, just go back a page, please. Back one more. Okay, you read that one, go down the next. Did you read this page yet? You did. Okay, so I probably need to explain China. Aha. Okay. Back in 2010, when this was happening in real time, we were told by our little internal chat group of civilians, myself included, were informed that the Chinese government, and as you can see from this, the intelligence operatives from RAND totally know and accept that the Chinese have a technological, a greater technological understanding of this terraforming organism than the West. The Russians obviously know a lot, but these guys, they reported that, I think they reported it in September. I think there was at least 6 weeks. But I was informed, along with other people in the little loop at the time, that the Chinese embassy, the Chinese government, had sent about 13 briefcases, all time-locked. These briefcases would self-open on October the 13th in the country that they were sent to, and they were not to be opened until October the 13th. Australia received one of these briefcases, and I was very fortunate. On the day of the briefcases being opened, I got a phone call from someone who knew someone who was present at the opening, and I was allowed to be given a, not a look at the contents, but a general description, which was really interesting because when I got back online and I started talking to the intelligence operatives, they told me what they knew was about in the briefcase. It's the same thing in each briefcase around the planet. And it basically came down to the Chinese government announcing to the Western world the following, roughly. Number one, the organism which our intelligence and security agencies are tracking around the ocean and which is affecting the hulls of our military craft and our submarines. It seems like the Chinese government was saying we have a direct relationship and deal with the people behind the organism. And today, October the 13th, 2010, we're going to demonstrate to you the reality of that. The reason the time lock was, the Chinese instigated a signal being broadcast, and this is where it gets interesting because we were told that it was transmitted from Great Wall. And you immediately think Great Wall of China, but you probably don't know that the Chinese research station right near the South Pole is also called Great Wall. I was never clear where the transmissions were coming from, but it didn't matter. The Western governments could see the signals. There was each of the briefcases contained a container with, and this caused them all to laugh, but it appeared to be a piece of excrement from the organism in one of its state, and the excrement itself was quite extraordinary. So the Chinese government, in a briefcase on October the 13th, 2010, showed the rest of the Western world and their intelligence communities that they had a direct relationship with a species of aliens that's coming back here, and that the world is going to change. They listed a bunch of anticipated changes that they believed were going to hit Earth. Some of them were geopolitical, some of them were geophysical, I think a couple of them were defined as cosmic, but there was no description of what was going to occur that I was given. If those details were in the suitcase, I was not told. I was told the nature of the event. One of the other pieces in there, can we go down? Is there another page? Yeah. Have I got 5 minutes left? Okay. Of course I have. I run the conference. Now, this is where it got sticky. As you've probably read here, hopefully you did, when the organism becomes fully activated, And I've got to be honest with you, this organism could be in your body right now. It could be in the ecosystem and the food. You might be infected and not know it. You may have come in contact with it. It does its thing at a certain time in the future, and it terrifies these intelligence agents. They absolutely terrified of what it might do. A lot of speculation as to what, why, and how. These guys did not have a very happy view of it. They encouraged us to circulate information which did not make China look good. I refused. I didn't want to take sides. I didn't know at that point whether I could fully trust these guys, weren't just playing me. It wasn't until I got to know Acolyte personally that I started to shift towards, no, these guys actually mean what they're saying. And I saw more evidence, which I can't go into details about, to convince me of it. So what they're saying is that one day in the future, in the very near future, if this scenario is true, people with a certain gene sequence, if you like, or a certain enzyme structure in the gene sequence, whatever that means, will experience some sort of shift differently from the rest of us. I don't know whether that shift is death, because in some of these cases, when you're talking to people who deal with aliens, a lot of aliens don't believe in death. They see the physical body die, but to a lot of aliens, a physical body is no more than a deep-sea diving suit to a human. It's something you put your body into, where in a hostile environment, it doesn't kill you and you get out at the end. Do any of you feel that you're just a physical body and that when you die, in the physical, that you die and you never exist again? Each one of you knows deep down you're an immortal spiritual being, which means you get out of this deep-sea diving suit, you might want to get and put on another one and be born as a baby again. Incidentally, that movie Avatar, one of the most interesting things I hope you took from the movie Avatar is the technology does exist to take the consciousness out of one human and put it into another vehicle. It doesn't have to be a human body. You can put it into another vehicle and that consciousness can function and operate machinery, follow instructions. It's been used on a military level for a long time. In fact, in some ways, it's the basis of how a lot of the extraterrestrial craft actually travel. It leads to the idea that some of the craft are alive. And if alive means having consciousness, then yes, those craft are alive. And more than one whistleblower in the public domain, David Adair, look him up on the internet, a rocket prodigy from America, 18, I think he was under 21 because he wasn't able to sign any security agreements. They took him to a strange craft down in Area 51 or Hangar 18, and the first thing he said to the German scientist overseeing the project was, "Oh my God, that engine's alive." And that's when they knew that, this technology is much greater. Okay, so have you all read this? I mean, I don't know what to make of it, but that's what they believed, and that's what they had synthesised and assessed. And I've got to tell you, those intelligence agents, unless they were all putting on a huge show, they took this very serious. Now, somewhere in there, I'm hoping that was the mention about the Chinese. After the briefcases were opened and discussion ensued, it became clear that the Chinese expected everything to remain the same until at least October or around October 2016. So I've been watching this time frame since 2010. I'm curious to see what other people on the internet nominate as the next big date. I mean, we've had 12/12, 2012, and other dates come and go, 11/11. I've lost track. Many times I've trampled to the top of a hill and meditated and fulminated and levitated and hoped that my output changed the consciousness of humanity. Who knows? But the Chinese government in their briefcases seem to indicate, from my understanding, that we have until 2016, maybe October 2016. And guess what happens in October 2016? US presidential election. And guess what people are asking more and more? Is Trump going to win? Is Hillary going to win? The implications of either are quite profound.